Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Spiritual Cake Podcast. We talk about anything and everything that has to do with that spiritual side of our existence. You're familiar with the physical and the mental and the emotional, but we have been discussing the spiritual, whatever that is. My name is Clint Houghton. With me is Wendy Dahl. Wendy.
Hi, Clint.
Hello, Wendy. If you're joining us for the first time, you should know that neither Wendy nor I run any kind of a religious organization, nor has our formal education been along those lines. We both raised relatively conservative Christian. Wendy is Mormon. I was raised Lutheran, but have since explored a lot of different philosophies and theologies. Plus, we are both in the event industry with an international clientele, and that has exposed us to a lot of different customs and traditions and rituals. And we bring all of that into this conversation. And that's exactly what it is. It's a conversation. And if you want to join the conversation at the end of this episode, we will tell you how to do that. Wendy, whenever I am thinking about what you and I are going to talk about, usually it's some last minute thing that like, oh my gosh, I never even thought of that. I don't know what I was reading. The subject of Jesus came up, but Jesus outside the Christian bubble, so to speak. And I thought, that's interesting because I've heard that different cultures look at Jesus way differently than traditional Christians do. And I thought, well, let's see what that's all about. Have I piqued your curiosity?
Absolutely.
I thought we should bring in the third member of our podcast, which is ChatGPT. I wanted to kind of narrow it down, like what are the top five world religions and how do they look at Jesus Christ? I thought I should put the Christ on the outside of it, kind of stick them together so there was no guesswork into which Jesus are you talking about. So the first came up with Islam. And here's something that I didn't know. It seems like Islam and Christianity at some point have been combative, at odds with each other. And we know there's been a billion wars that have started because of religious doctrine, so they say. Was curious about this. I don't know what I'm guessing this is all Arabic, but here's the thing. Jesus has a specific title, Isa ibn Maryam, which is Jesus, son of Mary. Okay, right off the bat, I'm thinking that's impressive that they acknowledge, his mom. And then he's considered one of the greatest prophets. He was born of a virgin, Mary, which is fully affirmed. Fully affirmed. Does that mean that they bought in and said, yeah, okay, it's supposed to be a virgin. So there you go. I
Sounds
mean,
like it.
yeah, fully affirmed. Perform miracles, great, by God's permission. The devout Muslims seem to always be thanking God or by God's will or something like that. Not the Son of God, though, and not divine, just a human being. Islam teaches he was not crucified, but raised by God. Isn't there a thing in the book of Acts? Jesus comes back. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where all the disciples are together and then Jesus shows himself?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't it Elijah where a chariot came down and took him up to heaven? He didn't die. Does that sound familiar?
No, but I haven't read that part yet.
I know you're
Remember,
getting to that
I'm
part.
still I'm still in the first book of the Old Testament.
But we should explain that for people joining us for the first time. Wendy is going through the Bible, a specific program, right? Is it kind of a thing?
No, it's just it's like a reading thing where it tells you how much to read every day, and I've obviously fallen behind, but I'll tell you what's so fun is it's like so interesting because I feel like it's like watching one of the movies that you've seen before that you enjoy, and then you watch it again and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is so great."
Yes. Yeah, I buy into that 100%. Okay, so Islam, raised up by God, I would imagine it was that kind of a thing. Now that I'm thinking about it, when he shows himself, and this is the Pentecostal program kind of started with this thing where they're all hiding in a room, and then Jesus shows himself, and that's where they all receive the Spirit, and they have the tongues of fire and the gifts of the Spirit and speaking in tongues and blah blah blah. Does that sound familiar in the book of Acts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know what happens to Jesus after that. Is there a thing where he just is taken up to heaven, or he's just because that
Well, I
sounds
would
really
imagine
familiar.
he departs somehow, but I'm not sure how. I
You
could
would
ask
think.
ChatGPT.
Well, okay, we'll look at that in a separate thing. All right. So Islam teaches he was not crucified, but raised by God, believed to return before the end of time. So I guess they're all on the same page with Christians with that. In Islam, Jesus is deeply respected, but strictly human and subordinate to God, which makes sense. Now, Judaism, I think this is kind of obvious. Jesus is generally reviewed as a historical Jewish teacher, not the Messiah. The Messiah has not yet come in Judaism, not divine and not part of God. Because if he were, then I think that he would then move into the Messiah category. That's what I'm guessing. His teaching are not considered authoritative within Judaism. You know what? This brings up the thing where people are saying that Jesus was not a Jew, but he was. That's what I've always believed. I mean, does the Mormon have an aspect on that or an angle on that?
No, but I think that would take you to the question of was Mary a Jew? Because if she was, then he is.
Oh, that's a great point. I never thought of it from that standpoint, but that is the tradition in the Jewish culture is
Hmm.
you're Jewish if your mom is Jewish. Okay. I just always kind of assumed he went to the temple and he grew up in a land where Judaism was the thing. And I just always assumed, and he knew the scriptures. That is an interesting thing. We could question the heritage of Mary in order to answer the question of whether or not
Interesting.
Jesus,
I just
yeah.
asked ChatGPT if Mary, the mother of Jesus, was Jewish, and it says yes. She lived in a region of Nazareth in the first century, and she was part of the Jewish people,
See, there
following
you
Jewish
go.
customs, beliefs, and religious practices of the time.
Some Jewish perspectives historically saw him as a misguided or false claimant. Ooh, that's turnabout as fair play because he warned of false prophets. Ooh, there's an interesting tangle on that. I can see a Hollywood story. In Judaism, Jesus is not central. He's outside the core belief system. That's pretty obvious. I officiate weddings and I co officiated with a rabbi. The Christian side of the couple thought about including the Lord's Prayer, and she was pretty adamant about no, we can't include that in this ceremony because of the things that were done in the name of, and that prayer apparently was part of the deal. I think she said specifically the Nazi regime in Germany. I thought that was interesting to have firm stances on specific scriptures or whatever that would be just part of the Christian canon, but represent something really, really, I was going to say repulsive. I don't know what the right word is. Does that make sense?
I think we're going back to like taking the minuscule aspects of religion and giving it your opinion. We always say that every religion has a million different religions within it because it's your personal perspective of the religion. And so
Right.
I've never heard of anybody saying anything relating to that, but for her, that sounds like it was a very important thing.
And, to each their own. Hinduism. No single official view because Hinduism is very diverse. Jesus is often seen as a great spiritual teacher or a guru. Some consider him an avatar. Now, this was presented to me as a concept when I was at the yoga center because a lot of their traditions or practices came from the Hindu religion. You know how there's a lineage of teachers?
Hmm.
He taught me this and he was taught by so and so who was taught by so and so. In the Hindu traditions, if I understand correctly, like Jesus was the son of God, Jesus was God on earth. That's what the Christians believe. Well, the Hindus believe that he was not the only one, that throughout generations, every now and then somebody would show up and would be an avatar. So in the yoga center, in this particular aspect of Hinduism, they recognize as a guy that lived in the 1800s as also an avatar, a Ramakrishna. And I had never thought of that before. Have you ever thought of that? Have you ever heard of that concept that an avatar? I mean, we've used the word avatar as a representation in the tech world. I think that the origination of the term came from this aspect from a religious context where an avatar would be God on earth. Have you ever heard of that before?
No.
Well, apparently there's a bunch of them. Well, when I say a bunch, I don't know how many. Five. I don't know. And so Jesus was one of those. One, he was definitely part of God. He was definitely an avatar, God on earth, but they think that he was not the only one. He was just the next one. So I thought that was interesting. His teachings, love, compassion, self-sacrifice, aligned with the Hindu philosophy. Yeah. Not usually seen as the only path to God. That's for sure. That's Hinduism. In Hinduism, Jesus can be honored as enlightened, but not exclusive. I guess that kind of follows what I was just saying about the avatar, and he
Hmm.
was one of them. Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
Buddhism, generally viewed as an enlightened teacher, not divine, not a creator, not a savior in a theological sense. His compassion and teachings may resemble those of Bodhisattva. Can you look up real quickly the definition of Bodhisattva?
It's a beautiful and powerful idea from Buddhism, and it is at its heart, it's about compassion in action. The simple meaning of bodhisattva is someone who is on the path to enlightenment or awakening, but chooses to stay and help others get there too. Instead of reaching enlightenment and leaving the cycle, they say, I'm not going anywhere until everyone is free from suffering.
Well done. Okay, so to explain the cycle, it's reincarnation, and that you keep coming back to Earth in a human form. I'm assuming a human form until you've learned what you're supposed to learn and you achieve enlightenment, and then you don't have to come back to the human form anymore. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
Yeah. Focus is less on who Jesus is and more on how his teachings align with reducing suffering. Jesus is respected for wisdom, but not worshiped. Sikhism. This is number 5. Jesus is honored as a holy man or teacher, not considered God or the only Son of God. that one word is pretty telling, isn't it? The only Son of God. Sikhism emphasized one formless God with no exclusive incarnations. His life is respected as an example of devotion and sacrifice. In Sikhism, Jesus is admired, but not unique in divinity. Divine Son of God, only in Christianity. Prophet, Islam, strongly yes. Teacher, guide, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism. Messiah, not in Judaism, and not in the other ones either, because that's not their gig. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So it's an interesting thing because we talk about how there are many religions as there are people on the face of the earth, which is what you said earlier. What have you been taught about Muhammad?
I have been taught nothing about Muhammad, but my curiosity has taken me down lots of conversations about Muhammad.
Okay, then maybe I should say, what's your stance on it? Or
My
as of
stance
right
on
this very second?
Muhammad,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there's been prophets that have existed throughout time. I actually did a little bit of a deep dive on Muhammad because I was curious, like, how did he come to be? How did he get people to follow him? And I believe it was just a conversation with ChatGPT. So, therein lies the extent of the knowledge base that I learned from. It was actually saying how he was copying some of the traditions, Catholicism, because he was having a hard
Catholicism.
yeah, he was having a hard time converting people to become Muslim because they were like, I don't know, but I'm kind of fuzzy on it because it was a while. It's kind of, it's really funny. After I go to church on Sunday, you know how your phone like suggests apps that you use at common times, like so in the morning
Oh,
there's certain
right.
apps that come up, and so for me anyway, it
Uh-huh.
changes throughout the day.
Uh-huh.
So every Sunday, ChatGPT is served up to me at 1 p.m. because I sit there and go down rabbit holes of like, I was really curious about the cross section of something like based on time and like people alive at the time and what happened and like why. And that got me down the whole thing of Muhammad and learning about why was he a prophet? What did he do? How did he get like the first group of people to follow him? And then how did it go from there? And then what did they follow? And why is it that when I'm watching a Muslim ceremony, there's an imam there? And if they're speaking in English, which sometimes they do because they're talking, in their language and then they talk in English so that we can all understand, it's so similar to other ceremonies. And so for me, that's where I'm just like, how is it that there's like this cross section between belief systems? Talking about Muhammad, I mean, there's a lot of controversy around Muhammad from people that aren't Muslim, as there are controversy about other prophets. And I mean, even Jesus, if you scope out and think like, why didn't everybody believe in Jesus? Well, why didn't everyone believe in Muhammad? Why didn't everyone believe in Joseph Smith? Why did everyone believe in Moses? These are all people throughout time that had followers. So I was curious, like, how did he get people to follow him? And it was because he had taken just a few threads from another religion so that it was like a familiar thing.
That begs the question of did he do that on purpose or was it just was it, what do they call it? Correlation or
Stroke of
causation?
genius. I
That's
didn't
interesting.
ask, but I was like, yeah, tell me about Muhammad. How did he come to be?
Right,
Why
right,
did
right,
people
right.
follow him? Those were the questions. I mean, those were the Wendy questions, where I'm just like, what?
It is a fascinating thing. Even within the Christian community, there are arguments about Jesus himself. What I grew up in the Lutheran tradition is where the Holy Trinity, where there's Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and they are all God. They're all
Mhm.
part of the Father, so to speak, but yet there's a separation. Now that I see some people every now and then, I guess one of the cool things about the internet is that we come across ideas that normally within our own little circle would never surface, like the conversations that we're having, or like you said, at 1 o'clock when you get out of service, then your mind is buzzing and you want to find out some stuff. It's interesting that some people, that's like a big argument in regard to, is he actually God? Is there a separation because he's the Son of God? And what does that mean? And is he also part of the Holy Spirit, or are they separate? Are they one? And this goes back and forth. And some people get really heated if it's not the version of Jesus that they want to believe in, or is important to them. Which reminds me of the movie with Will Ferrell, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, where he's a stock car racer. Did you ever see that?
No.
Well, it's pretty funny. When he does the prayer before the meal, he always prays to baby Jesus. And
Baby Jesus.
yes, specifically baby Jesus. One of his friends says, what baby Jesus? Because baby Jesus. And he just believed that was the one that he connected to. And so he always prays to baby Jesus. And there you go. And so it
Mhm.
goes with the rest of humanity. All right. Wendy, tell everybody how they get in touch with us.
You can find us at spiritualcake.com, where you can go back and listen to or read any of our previous episodes. You can click one of the two social media icons and join us on Facebook or Instagram, or you can send us a message requesting a topic or even to join the conversation.
Absolutely. And when you do join the conversation, please know we welcome you with open arms. That's it for this episode of the Spiritual Cake Podcast. This is Clint, and on behalf of Wendy, we will see you next time.